But before all of that, tonight's top story. It has emerged the man seen throwing luggage from a train attacked by rioters in Lurgan on the 12th was actually a community worker trying to save passengers.
Well, when he pleaded with the rioter not to firebomb the train, he was told, "Let them burn." Sharon O'Neill has the story.
Terror on a train. A community worker frantically drags out luggage soaked in petrol. Minutes later, he confronts a masked man with a 5-gallon drum of diesel in his hands.
I told him there was women and children on board the train. He said, "F them, let them burn." This person was intent on killing everybody on the train, had no regard for their lives.
55 passengers, men, women and children, are on this Dublin-bound Enterprise train. It's surrounded by a mob in Lurgan on the 12th. But the full horror of what happened has only emerged. This community worker, who doesn't want to be identified, ran to the rear carriage and saw a woman's face pressed against the window. We've changed his name to protect his identity.
At that point in time, she just looked terrified. Yeah, she just looked terrified. So I moved from there to the front of the train and shouted to the people who were there that there was people still on board the train. From then, I got into the driver's carriage. There was a small fire still to my left-hand side, down on the floor. I moved from there through the carriage and started shouting to the people because somebody shouted to me that they were going to set the train on fire.
The passengers, staff and the driver had locked themselves in a carriage. They were so terrified the rioters would board the train, John had to persuade them he was on their side.
We tried to reassure them. There was Boy Scouts, there was people from abroad, there was businessmen, there was women, there was elderly people on board the train. There was a woman who was an absolute bitch. They just couldn't comprehend what was going on.
John knew time was running out. They'd been trapped on the train for 15 minutes. John managed to convince the terrified driver to move the train, and he was with him every step of the way until it reached Ardoyne.
It was, you're quite willing to kill everybody who was on board, and that was it. No regard for human life whatsoever. These people were just, they were completely innocent. There was women and children, and these people had no regard for life whatsoever. I can't get my head around that.
The line is close to the Kilwilkie estate, a dissident Republican stronghold.
There's clearly dissonant elements behind it. There's no doubt about that. Some of the known faces in the area were there. I think that there's people who are dragged into these situations once the trouble flourish, who may not even have sympathies with the dissidents but have misspent loyalties to some of the local people.
But for the work of a community worker on Monday, there could have been mass murder on the railway line, and not for the first time, may I say.
There have been 25 security alerts here in the last year, but nothing like this. Police have pledged to catch those responsible. Sharon O'Neill, UTV Live in Lurgan.
Meanwhile, 14 people have been arrested in the past 24 hours in connection with the recent violence. Last night, further trouble broke out in the Ardoyne area, though police said it wasn't as intense as in previous nights. Tracy McGee reports.
Rioters were back on the streets of Ardoyne last night. Numbers were significantly reduced and the trouble less intense than in previous evenings. Nevertheless, during the sporadic violence, police were attacked with petrol bombs and a car was hijacked and set alight. Police responded with baton lines and water cannons. The majority of the troublemakers were young, and as in previous nights, children were involved. From early evening, groups of young people had gathered at Ardoyne shops. Community workers and Sinn Féin members had attempted to stop violence flaring. But it was clear a hardcore element were in no mood to listen.
You hate behind a mask or something, you want something to be ridiculous, you're in the wrong face in this district, it's a private district, and a good district, you can have some of this race, yeah. Something has some matter.
Sinn Féin has insisted that a lot of the rioters are not from the Ardoyne area. In fact, there have been repeated claims that much of the trouble of recent days has been instigated by individuals from outside. Even the sit-down protest before the Orange Order March on the 12th, which it's claimed represented the Ardoyne residents, contained many people who didn't live in the area.
Clearly there's people I've seen in the protest, on the evening, the sit-down protest in the Crumlin Road, and I've lived in Ardoyne all my life, and there are people there that I've never seen before.
UTV has learned that at least 5 members of the real IRA from Derry were present that day. From West Belfast, there were 2 high-profile IRIGI members. Also there, West Belfast Republican Tony Catney, who denied being the real IRA mastermind behind the violence in Ardoyne last year. Last night's trouble may have been much less intense than on previous nights, but the PSNI officer in charge of public order, ACC Duncan McCausland, has said there was a hardened core of around 12 people who were intent on causing disorder. Last night, 2 men were arrested during the disturbances. Police say they're determined to catch the troublemakers.
The 2 men arrested here in Ardoyne weren't the only ones. In fact, the police have arrested 14 people in the last 24 hours. 2 men, aged 25 and 35, were arrested in connection with a shooting incident which took place during a riot in North Queen Street on the 11th night. A further 10 arrests were made today in connection with trouble in South and East Belfast on the 12th. Police say they are still reviewing evidence and more arrests will follow.
Today, the police put on show their evidence-gathering operation. 20 dedicated officers in the public order unit are now trawling through hundreds of hours of footage and thousands of photographs to identify the rioters.
Already prioritised all the incidents that we've been talking about. Obviously the attempted murder of police officers, where people have been seriously injured and significantly injured. There will be arrests, and there have been arrests already to deal with those, and I then go through it and start making arrests in relation to the offences based on how serious they are.
Police say they have even received footage from members of the public. Over coming days, they will be releasing pictures of the troublemakers in the hope that the public will come forward to identify them. Tracy McGee, UTV Live, Ardoyne.